Mute. Hi, sorry about that. I was having some computer problems. I think I'm back now. Um, I was trying to bring up my Bar Ilan CD um, to talk further a little bit about some of these matters. I'll be with you in just a second. Mishpat. Shem. Okay. Okay. All right. So why don't we get started? Let's see here. Okay. All right. So we were looking at some of the details in the Likutim. Yesterday, we saw that if you write someone a bad check and they incur costs, you have to pay for that. That's called direct hezek. That's direct damage. And Paul sent out an email to me yesterday showing me the latest rates of bounce checks, which is pretty shocking to me, I must say. Anyway, I didn't realize it was so high. All right.
So be careful out there.
That's right. Now, the next in the Likutim is Bikesh Me Chavero Sheyavo Lahakitzo Baboker. Here's another case. You ask your friend, you're living in the yeshiva dormitory, and you ask your friend, please wake me up in the morning. V'hiniach et hamishkafayim al haritzba tachat kitzei hamita. And before you went to bed, after you asked your friend to wake you up in the morning, you put your glasses down on the floor by one of the legs of the bed. So your friend comes to wake you up and accidentally steps on the glasses and breaks them. So Efshir the Potter Kevin Shehayashen Pasha Bameshinicham B'mokum Derisat Raglayim. So it would seem, perhaps, he writes, quoting from a contemporary sefer, that the sleeper is the one who was negligent by putting his glasses in a place where people could step on them. And you can't hold someone liable. You invited them to come and wake you up. So therefore, you would not be able to hold them accountable. Okay, next case. Oreach shahalach lishon lachadar mishkavo v'shachach legavot ner sha'ava. So you have a guest is staying in your house, and he goes to bed, and he forgot to blow out the candle that he was using. I guess this is before electricity, so he forgot to blow out the candle that he was reading from. V'hinicho dolek v'nisraf hashulchan v'argas shel balabayas. And as a result, the table and the chest of the host is burned. V'chein shivcha shemibli hashkacha la'asir ha'itzim shal hatanur be'eit shebo'er garma deleka v'nisraf klei habayit. Or a housekeeper who, through her negligence, she forgot to remove the wood in the oven when the oven was burning. And this caused the fire to break out, and many things in the house were burned. Mechuyavim l'shalem ki adamu ad la'olam. So they have to pay in those cases. Now, this happens all the time. You have a housekeeper who breaks stuff. And it's gotten so bad, some of them, they don't even tell you. You just discover, hey, I used to have 8 wine glasses. How come I only have 7? And then you put 2 and 2 together and say, oh, it must be Clarissa who broke the glass and just never bothered to tell us. Has this ever happened to you? Anyway, the point is that the reason why they're not telling you is because they know they're going to be held liable to pay, technically, al pi halacha. And the fact is that it's something that we all chalk up to to the cost of having a housekeeper. But obviously, if it happens too many times, you got to get rid of them. Bachurim harochvim likrat chatan v'kala v'hiziku ze et ze mamon chavero derech simcha uschok. So you have boys who are riding on each other. I guess it means, I'm not sure if they're on each other's backs, and they end up damaging each other's property through joking and through just goofing off. V'chein b'shar dvar simcha hol v'nagu kein petur. Since this is the norm for when you go to a simcha, you know that you probably will stand a good chance of your suit getting ripped, or other things will happen if you get too much in the fray of things. So then anyone who causes damage in that kind of scenario is going to be patur. But if the Beis Din at the time feels that it's appropriate to create some kind of barrier, some kind of rectification because things are getting out of hand, then the Beis Din has the right to do so. So in other words, the normative halacha would hold anyone exempt in that kind of scenario. But if the rabbis feel that things have gotten out of hand and the boys are getting too wild, and they wish to institute some kind of policy that if you cause this damage, you're going to be chayiv as a means of curtailing the skullduggery and the foolhardy behavior.
Exuberance.
The exuberance, yeah. I can't imagine this happening to Canadian boys, but you could imagine kids go crazy, right? So then they have a right to do so. V'yesh omrim im hizik echad chavero mikoch simchas purim pater milasham. It's for that reason that there are opinions. The Ramah writes this in Hilchos Purim, that if you injure someone or damage someone's property on Purim, then you don't have to pay. V'hainu yimasa mikoch simcha. That's obviously only if you were doing it in the course of the celebration. But if you intended to injure them or their property, and you said, oh, well, the Shulchan Aruch says that if I injure someone's property, damage someone's property on Purim, I'm putter. So this is a great opportunity for me to smash their windows. So then obviously if your intention is to damage their property, then you're not going to be putter, you're going to be chayav. He says, and the Bach, who's a commentary on the Torah, actually creates a distinction between if it's large amounts of damage or small amounts of damage, or whether it's damage to one's person or to one's property. The behezek gadol makpidin ve'in minhag lahaftir behezek gadol. That when it comes to major damage or damage to one's person, we don't let you off the hook. We don't say, oh, well, it was just Purim, you have to give the guy a break. You broke my arm, for goodness sake. So then you have to pay for hospital and pain and suffering. So after Kaimel Andim, he gia l'shichruso shalot de'ein ma'asav klum b'ariu kamo ashoita mikol makom imizik l'chaver chayav. Another facet of these halachos is that, normally we say that if a person becomes so deeply intoxicated he doesn't know what he's doing, then his actions are of no consequence. Well, that may be true in certain halachic instances, but if he causes damage, he has to pay. Next, ha'omer l'chaveru shikor, kelav shel ploni, va'ani ashalem. I'm sorry, I misread it. Ha'omer l'chaveru shvor kelav shel ploni, va'ani ashalem ba'adcha. So if a person says to his friend, go ahead and destroy someone else's property, and I'll pay for it. Okay? So Harei Hashovro Chayav V'Homer Patur. So we have this principle in general that Ein Shliach Lidvar Aver. You cannot say, well, I was told to do it, so I should be patur. What do you mean? You were told to do it. Who told you to do it? Well, my friend told me to do it. So the famous saying, well, if your friend told you to jump off the bridge, would you jump off a bridge? And here we say, Divrei Harav, Divrei Hatalmud, Divrei Mishomin. Hashem told you that you're not allowed to comport yourself that way. So why listen to someone who's God's child, God's disciple? The master told you don't do that. and the student told you to do it, who are you going to listen to? So you chose of your own free will to break this guy's utensils. You just wanted a pretense so that you wouldn't have to pay for it. So he said he would pay for it, but you ultimately are chayav. And the person who told you to break the guy's or damage the guy's property, he's going to be potter, umikol makom, but nonetheless, the guy who instigated is nonetheless mikri rasha. He's called an evil person. Sha'arei hichshil od v'chizek yidei ovrei haber, because he caused another person to sin, and he supported and egged on a guy to perform an avera. Anytime you promote someone else to do an avera, you're called a rasha. Ba'ayin shamod kama pratim me'inyanim elu. I said, he says, I refer you to the Shulchan Aruch there to learn more about this topic. And as it turns out, that's what the thing I was looking for. As it turns out, there is an entire chapter in Shulchan Aruch that deals with the halachas of helping someone else cause damage. It's so we'll just look at the Aruch HaShulchan over here. He says, if everyone can see it inside, Ha'omer lechavero kras ksusi shavor eskadi al menasha ata patur hareze patur. So first, the Shulchan Aruch, the Aruch HaShulchan writes that if Reuven says to Shimon, "Hey, tear my garment or break my vase, and don't worry, you won't be chayav to pay." Right. So let's say it's the owner of the object, it's himself, and he says, "Go right ahead and tear it. Sure, destroy it. I want you to. Don't worry, I won't hold you liable." Now, why is he doing this? It could be for any number of reasons. We don't know. So hareza potter. So the halacha is that since Reuven said expressly that Shimon could do this and he's potter, so Shimon is not going to be held liable afterwards if Reuven says, "I was just kidding." V'lo amrinan shederach schok amar lekein, the im haya derech schok lo haya omer lo al menas liftor. He says, and we don't say that Reuven was just joking, because if Reuven was really joking, he would never have made the statement, "Go right ahead, I won't hold you liable." V'lachein im lo amar le al menas liftor harei zechayev the talinin shederach schok amar lekein sheyikra v'yishalem. And therefore, if Reuven says to him, "Go right ahead, tear my garment," but he never said on the condition that you'll be exempt, right? Then if he didn't say those last words, and Shimon goes ahead and tears the garment, he can still be held liable to pay, because we assume that Reuven was just joking with him. Even if he said, "Go ahead and tear it and I'll pay you for it," that was probably a joke. He has to say, on the condition, you can tear it on the condition that you will be exempt from paying for the damages. He has to be as explicit as possible in order for Shimon to be potter. And this is all true, the above is all true, only when Shimon was given the object for safekeeping, and Reuven says to him, "Oh, you know the thing I gave you for safekeeping? Sure, feel free to destroy it." Aval imlo bo liyado b'torah shmir v'amar le kach kli ze v'shavro beged ze v'karo v'asakein harei ze pater afal pi shelo amar le al menas liftor. He says, but if they're not in Shimon's possession, if Reuben walks over to Shimon and says, "You see this new silk jacket that I'm wearing? Go ahead and tear it." Even if he didn't say on the condition that you'll be potter, if Shimon goes ahead and tears it, he's potter. He says, because the only time we assume that Reuven is joking is when he had asked Shimon to watch these things. And then he says, "Oh, I don't mind if you break them, don't worry." That's a scenario where it's more likely that Reuven is joking, because after all, he had hired or requested from Shimon to watch them. He says, because, it's like a fellow who goes over to someone and says, "I'm entrusting this object to you. You could always break it, and I know that." And so he doesn't mean to tell him to go ahead and break it. In that instance, he's just kidding around with him and telling him, you now have a very, very valuable object. Like if I lend you my car and I say, be careful with it. It's very valuable. It's a $50,000 car. Sure, go ahead and crash it for all I care. And that is assumed to be a joke, right? But if I go over to you and I say, take this item and just smash it against the wall. I can't do it, but I want you to do it. So then, because he came over to you, he's not joking. Okay. He says, "Velo dami lamashi yispar b'simin tav chaf aleph omer lechaver katas yadi almanas lifter dechayiv zeo pshita dechavla degufa lo machal inish." He says it's different from a guy who comes over to you and says, "Here, take this machete and hack off my hand." Now, in that situation, as gruesome as that sounds, no matter what, the person who hacks off the guy's hand is chayiv to compensate him for the loss of his limb. And the reason is because no one is ever going to be moichel on a loss of bodily functionality, a loss of limb. Aval hezek mamon yachol lios shemachal elim kein yesh hochacha she'enu mochel. But when it comes to loss of property, it's very prevalent. It certainly is more likely that a guy says, "Destroy this for me." It's like, it's my wife gave it to me for my birthday, and now she left me. So I want you to go ahead and destroy it. Here, take it and just smash it against the wall. But it could still be that there's a violation of baltashchis in a situation where you're destroying something that's perfectly good. Now it could be that there's no baltashchis in a case where it's therapeutic for the guy for you to break the gift that he got from his girlfriend who just broke up with him or something like that. Because baltashchis is only when it's wanton destruction that serves no constructive purpose. But the Aruch HaShulchan adds that is if there's just really no benefit in destroying it, so then there may be an isser of baltashchis. Okay. He continues and he says, let me just see. I will skip that one. He says, "V'chol zeh b'shel atzmo." All that we've set up above is when the property belongs to Reuven, and he tells Shimon, "Go ahead and break it." Aval ha'omer lechaver shvar kelev shel ploni al menashe tiftor. But if Reuven goes over to Shimon and says, "You see Levi's new car? Here, take this baseball bat and smash it in," right? So he's in that situation, and don't worry, I'll pay for the damages. So hareza hashovrin chayiv l'shalim below zeshetzivo. So the guy who does the breakage is the one who's liable, and not the one who egged him on. Even when he gave you a verbal promise that he would pay for whatever damage you caused. The lav bidvarn bilvad nechayivenu. He says it's just because he said something, like, it does not mean that he can be held liable. And this fool who listened to him and decided to break Levi's car window is the one who has to pay, excuse me. And Shimon should never have thought to himself, "Oh, I'll get off from paying because Reuven promised that he would pay." The over al lifnei iver lo sitein michshol shali dezeh hifsid zeh mamon v'gam garm laver al baltashchis v'lachein ein zeh sheshiber kishlucho dein shlich l'dvaraver. So basically, everything that was quoted in the Likutim, in the Imrei Yaakov. Okay, it's just some other examples of this. Ha'omer lechaver zrok manu liyam ve'eschayev ani loch. Reuven goes over to Shimon and says, "Take your wallet and throw it in the ocean, and I'll pay you for whatever's in your wallet." Okay? Yesh omrim dechayev midin arvus kamo b'tein mana leplone ve'eschayev ani lach. So some say that in this case, Reuven does have to pay Shimon because there is such a concept of if Reuven says to Shimon, give $100 to Levi, and I will owe it to you, then there is such a principle that if Shimon lays out $100 for Levi, then he can hold Reuven liable to pay because basically Reuven acted as a guarantor. So v'yesh omrim depater dedin arvus ena ela kishiki le'eza adam hana they arvusa. But other people argue that Reuven is pater because the only time that Reuven can indebt himself on a loan is if someone benefits from that transaction, right? Kemoshe matzinu ba'arvus Yehuda liYaakov ba'ad binyamin, and we find this biblically is that Yehuda was acted as a guarantor to his father Yaakov to bring back Binyamin. So there you see that a person can obligate themselves and place themselves in debt. Okay, but the point is that but in a case where Reuven says, take your money and throw it away, that's no one's benefiting from that. So according to the second opinion, Reuven cannot be held liable because all he's doing is just trying to deceive this person. The only time that Shimon would be pater, or it would be in a situation like this. Reuven gives money to Shimon and says, throw it in the ocean. In that situation, and he says, and don't worry, you're not going to be liable. I'll hold you, I will indemnify you, I will exempt you. So in that situation, Shimon will be pater. It sounds like if we look in Even HaEzer, the Ramah seems to be more lenient in this case and will not hold Reuven liable. Okay, so if he tells Shimon to throw his money into the ocean. All right, now, let's see. Let me see if there's any other cases like this. Okay, it changes topics, so we'll leave it here for now, and let's go on to the next.
But I have to say that the damage my car and you won't be liable sounds a little bit too close to potential insurance fraud. What's going to happen next? Is he going to say my car got damaged? Like, I mean, why would he want his car damaged?
There could be any number of reasons. Maybe, there could be any number of reasons. It could be a malicious thing that, maybe he got the car as a gift from from a parent or a loved one, and he wants to fight them. Who knows?
I guess if you ever damage my stuff for me, you have to ask a lot of questions. I don't think you can just do it.
Yeah.
But okay, thank you.
Okay. Next thing in the Likutim is Yesh li zaher shelo lahadbik modaot al kirot chavero shelo birshut. You have to be careful not to post posters on someone else's property, on someone else's wall. You're causing them damage. I had this a few years ago. A guy put up, it was right before Sukkot, and he was offering a Sukkah building service. He put one of these glue stickers on our stop sign in our parking lot. So I called him and I said, "What a chutzpah you have! You have no right to do that." Right? I scratched it out as best I could, but I couldn't fully remove it. That was real damage. I mean, that guy's causing damage to the shul property, trying to advertise his services. And you find that people do this all the time, and it's so wrong. Kimochein yesh li zohir milahorido lahashchis modos mischarios. But at the same time, you have to be careful that if a person has legally posted an advertisement, it is usher for anyone else to deface it or try to remove it. In other words, both halachos are true. You may want to deface someone else's advertisement because they're a competitor, and you don't want that guy to get the business, but that's usher. You can't do that. The tzarich iyun adkama zman zacha bahen hamadbik. The only question that we don't have clarity on is, let's say there's a public area where people put their advertisements. How long do you have to let that person's advertisement be visible before you can paste something else on top of it? Right? That's a very unclear kind of thing, right? There are certain walls that are just plastered with layers and layers of advertising. So how, in most situations, like that's true more in Israel than it is here. And in most cases in the US and Canada, you're not allowed to post no bills, right? That's phrased on construction sites. It'll tell you that you can't post anything. And sometimes the construction workers, the contractor will actually charge people to put their advertisement on a surface that is visible to the public, because that's one way of making money from the construction site. So, but in places where there's just a free-for-all, it's not clear when I'm causing someone else damage by plastering over my sign over their sign. So that's not clear. All right, we'll hold it here for today. We'll continue in Mirz Hashem tomorrow.